In the name of Allah and hello everyone. This is a recording that I am preparing for you about chapter 4 of your phonology course book. As I said earlier in a video that I recorded for you uh, about a grammar lecture, I'm doing this in order to compensate for the missed lectures that happened due to the protests. So, uh, in chapter 4, uh, we deal with a topic that first addresses the mechanism of producing speech sounds, and then it moves on to describe some of the English consonants. Therefore, chapter 4 is mainly about it is titled Voicing and Consonants. Starting with voicing, it is, let me move to the slideshow mode. Um, it is a phenomenon that occurs in the larynx, and by voicing, we mean the vibration of the vocal folds. So, what are the vocal folds? Where are they placed? And what are their functions? In order to be familiar with this, we need to start with an introduction about the larynx and then move on to the other concepts. The larynx has several important functions in producing speech, but before talking about the functions, uh, we will look at its anatomy, its physiology, what it is constructed of, and how it works. So, its main structure is made of cartilage, and cartilage in Kurdish we call it karkraga. It's a structure that's less hard than bone and has two large cartilages. They're placed in a shape so that to make a hollow box, a box with a space inside. The cartilages are relatively large and in common daily speech, people call the larynx Adam's apple. It's placed in the front of your throat, and it's more obvious in men than women. It is at the top of the trachea, uh, which is the windpipe, the pipe that we use for breathing in and breathing out. I'll show you a picture in a minute. And then inside the box that we said, which is made by the two large cartilages inside the larynx, we have the vocal folds. The vocal folds are two thick flaps of muscle, which are like a pair of lips. Um, and the vocal folds also have very important functions in speech as well. Uh, an older name, or actually another name that's used to describe the vocal folds, is the vocal cords. Many other phoneticians call them the vocal cords, and vocal folds uh, is also used in order to describe that structure inside the larynx. Between the vocal folds or the vocal cords, whatever name we call them, but in order to keep consistency, we will usually refer to them by the expression vocal folds. There's an opening, there is a space between the two vocal folds, and that space is called, or that opening is called glottis. And I have brought you this image from the internet, which shows the larynx. Uh, if this is a face, the larynx is usually placed here, as you can see. And these three structures are the larynx, but from three different angles. Picture A, or the first diagram is an anterior view, a view from the front of the throat or from the front of the larynx. And diagram B is posterior view, a view from the back of the larynx. And this is a view from the side. And we said that it consists of two large cartilages. The cartilage at the front is called the thyroid cartilage. This is here, the brownish cartilage is the thyroid cartilage, which is rather large cartilage structure. And then at the back, the vocal folds are attached to a pair of small cartilages that are called the arytenoid cartilages. These two small cartilages here, if you can see the cursor, number one, number two, arytenoid cartilages, and this is a view from the side. These two red structures are the vocal folds. Again, this is the thyroid, this is the thyroid cartilage from the side, and these are the arytenoid. By the way, these are just to make clear what I mean, what is meant by the larynx. Otherwise, you don't need to um, know all the details about the anatomy and the physiology of the larynx. And this is the trachea or the windpipe, the pipe that we use for breathing. Again, the same pipe from different views. This is uh, inside the larynx, the vocal folds from superior view, a view from the above. This is one of the folds, and this side is the left hand side of the folds, the vocal folds, of course. Um, at the front, yes, this is anterior, so this is the front of the throat. We can see the root of the tongue, probably, and the structure above the vocal folds is called epiglottis. This is the space that we called the opening between the vocal folds, which is called glottis. Here on in picture B, uh, again, this is a real one taken from a laryngoscope, a small camera that's inserted inside a human throat in order to take pictures of the throat and of the larynx as well. So the hole, something like a hole that you can see, is the glottis, and these two small structures, which are like lips, as we said, are the vocal folds. Okay, and there are links to three videos that I have brought to you, and I'll send the slides to you in order to check the videos for yourselves. But we will check the videos very briefly, watch them together, probably some scenes, but not all of the videos. Let's start with the second one and see what it. Mm, no, I don't want to continue. I just want to move you the structure. Okay, let me see. I can open a new tab like this and go to the destination. Okay, this is a video created by University of Washington in speech and hearing uh, clinic. This is a realistic video created using a laryngoscope inside the throat of a person to show how the vocal folds work. Let's watch the video together.
Okay. Okay. Do that soft. More E. There you go. Okay. Take a breath. Make E and do it loud.
You can see how the vocal folds vibrate inside the larynx.
Very nice.
Well, that's one of the videos. Another video that I have prepared for you. Well, I haven't prepared, but I have copied the link and is, I think, important to watch is this one. They talk about the larynx in a very amusing and entertaining way, and at the same time, it teaches you, shows you how the larynx works. uh, when the length of the larynx changes, what happens.
And now to our lab, where we're putting our bodies to the test to show you how your body works.
That really hurts.
Just don't try any of this at home. Today, we're looking at the voice.
When you're young, your vocal cords are short and thin, so your voice is high-pitched.
When you get older, they get longer and thicker, so your voice gets deeper.
When you whisper, you don't vibrate your vocal cords at all.
Shh.
Okay, so what they said basically is that when you are young, your vocal folds are shorter, so we have a high-pitched voice. أما كوني دنگی مرو زیقترە یان ناسکترە، بەڵام کاتێ شەرەشێتە منەوە دەنگەژەیەکان the vocal folds ئەو کاتە درێژتر ئەبنەوە ئەستوورتریش ئەبنەوە بۆیە دەنگ گڕترە بێ دەنگی مرۆڤی بەتەمەن ئەگۆڕێ جا ئەمە هۆکاری جیاوازی نێوان دەنگی نێرومێشە دەنگی مێ دەنگی کچ دەنگی ئافرەت بە عام ناسکترە لەبەرەوەی پچی بەرزترە لەرەلەری بەرزترە بەڵام دەنگی نێر بە عام گڕترە لەبەرەوەی لەرەلەری کەمترە هەروە لەبەرەوەی لارینکس لە پیاوانە گەورەترە لە ئافرەتانە لە ژنانە تۆزێک بچووکترە ئەمانە هەمووی بنە هۆی بۆ دروستکردنی جیاوازی لە باڵتی دەنگەکانە.
When you whisper, you don't vibrate your vocal cords at all.
Shh.
But what do vocal cords look like and how do they work? Well, this nifty medical gadget is going to show you.
This is a nase endoscope. It's a very small camera that I'm going to put up my nose and look at my vocal cords.
The best way for doctors like us to access the vocal cords is through the nose, because if the camera went via the mouth, the patient would start to gag and feel sick.
So feel your throat. You'll feel a hard, gristly bit at the front. That's your voice box or your larynx, and that's where your vocal cords sit. I can see the camera really well at the back of your mouth. It's very weird. It is like there's a little spaceship exploring the inside of your mouth.
And Chris's tongue looks a bit alien too, but let's keep going.
So Chris, now put it down to the back of your throat and show us your vocal cords. Okay, that's lovely. So we're now going past the back of Chris. Oh, that's really good. There. What we can see now is Chris's vocal cords. They look like flaps or webs going across his windpipe. What happens is, as your lungs force air up your windpipe, these flaps start to vibrate, and it's the vibration that causes noise.
So let's see them in action.
So Chris, can you hum a high note? Now hum a low note. So when Chris hums a high note, what you see is the vocal cords tightening. That means they vibrate faster and make a higher note. And when he hums a low note, the vocal cords relax and they're much floppier, they vibrate more slowly, and you get a lower note.
Have a go at feeling the vibrations of your own vocal cords by putting your fingers on the front of your throat and humming a note. Rating. Now we're going to try breathing in 2 different gases that will change the speed at which our vocal cords vibrate and show you the effect it has on our voices.
This gas is lighter than air.
This will make it easier for my vocal cords to move, meaning they'll vibrate faster. So will my voice sound different?
Well, the gas is lighter than air, and that makes the vibration of the vocal folds faster. When the vocal folds vibrate faster, let's see what happens.
My voice does sound different, and that's because this gas is thinner or less dense. So it allows my vocal cords to vibrate more quickly, and that makes the pitch higher.
Chris's gas is thicker than air, so it'll be harder for his vocal cords to move, meaning they'll vibrate slower.
This gas is thicker or denser than air, and that means my vocal cords can't vibrate as easily, which is why my voice sounds deeper.
You sound ridiculous.
Pipe down, Squeaky.
Yeah, so you saw how the change in the vibration and the length of the vocal folds changes the quality of the sound. Okay, moving to next slide. Now watch the other video as well that I have sent you. It contains some useful information, and if we need, we'll come back to it later. I'll send you the links as I said. Uh, the vocal folds then can have different positions. It's not they're not always in the same position when we speak and when we use language. So uh, we talked about the opening between the vocal folds that we call glottis. The glottis can be open when the vocal folds move apart from each other, and the glottis can be closed when the vocal folds are together, they are attached to each other. So, but this is a very simple way of describing the vocal folds. Actually, there are a much more complex, a very much more complex range of changes in the vocal folds and their positions. These changes are very important in speech, so we will look at four easily recognizable states or positions of the vocal folds. We'll consider only four of them, although there are more complex positions as well. Um, the first position is called wide apart. In this case, the vocal folds are moved away from each other, and in this state, the vocal folds, when they are apart, we normally breathe, and when we produce the voiceless consonants, the vocal folds are in this position. For example, in the position of s or f or any other voiceless consonant, the vocal folds are moved apart from each other. The second position is narrow glottis. The glottis is narrowed, so if air is passed through the glottis when it is narrowed, the result is the fricative sound with the symbol of h, of h. This is the sound of h, as if when you produce the first sound of hat, for example. When saying this sound, when articulating this sound, the position of the vocal folds is called narrow glottis. Then the third position is position for vocal fold vibration. They are in a state where they can vibrate. When the edges of the vocal folds, the edges are touching each other or nearly touching each other. They're very, very close to each other. In this case, the vibration happens very rapidly. If there is enough pressure below the vocal folds, when the air passes between them, the vocal folds move apart. When the air passes, then they come back close to each other, and this happens about 200 to 300 times per second in women's voices, and about half that, 100 to 150 times in men's voices. So when we produce the vowels or the voiced consonants, the vocal folds are in this position. And finally, when the vocal folds are tightly closed, they're firmly, very tightly closed, they're very firmly pressed together so that the air cannot pass. In this case, a glottal stop or a glottal plosive is produced, and the symbol for it is like a question mark without the dot. The sound is like a gentle coughing. Eh, eh, That is called a glottal stop or a glottal plosive. So mainly these are the four main easily recognized positions for the vocal folds. What part when the voiceless consonants are produced or for normal breathing. That's the first position. The second position, narrow glottis, when we produce the fricative sound h. Then the third position, when the vocal folds vibrate. And the fourth position, when the vocal folds are tightly closed and no air is allowed to escape between them, uh, as in the production of the glottal stop. Okay, the next section is about respiration and voicing. By respiration, we mean the process of breathing in and breathing out, and by voicing, we mean the vibration of the vocal folds. You know, I have talked about this earlier in our lectures, and I'll repeat that air is the fuel of speech sounds. In order to be able to be heard by the others, in order to be able to speak, we need air. And um, in a process, in a mechanism that's very common in the languages of the world, which is called the egressive pulmonic airstream, that fuel is provided in order to speak. The egressive means coming out, and pulmonic means from the lungs, and airstream means a stream of air. So, in the majority of the languages of the world, we depend on uh, airstream coming out from the lungs in order to be able to speak. But in some other languages, uh, an airstream that moves inward, not outward, that moves inside the body, in that mechanism, doing that mechanism, sounds are produced. In some languages, for example, of African nations, we have clicks. I want you to search for the word clicks in African languages, and you will find that those sounds are not produced with air coming out from the lungs. In other languages, we have ejectives. Ejectives also use air from the larynx, not from the lungs. So, uh, but in English, in Kurdish, in Arabic, in many other languages, the sounds are produced when air comes out, egressive, from the lungs, pulmonic. So, egressive pulmonic airstream basically means that depending on air coming out from the lungs, so as to speak. Um, as I said, search for clicks. Clicks are sounds like when made from uh, movements of the tongue. Respiration, as I said, is uh, breathing, inhalation, and exhalation. Inhalation means breathing in, and exhalation means breathing out. So, how do we use airstream to speak? Normally, breathing in and breathing out uh, take um, about the same time, but when we speak, the lungs take in air very quickly and let it out very slowly. So, in fact, it's about 1 to 8 in favor of exhalation. We breathe in 8 times faster than breathing out. We use the air, the breath, in order to speak. So, between sentences, between phrases, sometimes we breathe in, we take air in, and we use that air in order to produce the sounds that we want to make. If we breathe in 1 second, let's say, but that's not the correct ratio, but I just want to make a comparison for you. أقل بيك ثانية هواها المجين لو أنا بهشت ثانية بيدينه يعني يك بهشت ريجكا يك برامبر بهشت لكاتي قصة كردنا كواتا هويا أتواني. That's why we can speak for some time without breathing in again. The rib cage and the lungs uh, make some movements in order to make it possible to use the air that has been inhaled during speech. So far we have talked about the mechanism that we use to speak, and this diagram shows us divisions of the speech mechanism. So the systems that you see in the diagram are the chest, the throat, and the head. We use the chest for the respiratory system, for breathing in and breathing out. We use the throat for phonatory system, for voicing. Another name for voicing is phonation. Therefore, the system is called phonatory. And we use the head as the articulatory system in order to make the speech sounds. And let me click here. Okay, so this brings us to voicing. We've talked about the larynx, which contains the vocal folds, and we've talked about the vocal folds and their different positions, how fast they vibrate, and what changes can they go under their positions. And then we came to respiration, which means breathing, how it helps in speaking. We breathe in very fast, but we breathe out very slowly when we speak, and we depend on the breath, we depend on the air that comes from the lungs in order to make the speech sounds. Okay, during these um, descriptions, it seems as if the air is free to pass with no obstruction, but that's really not the case. When the air passes from the lungs out of our mouths or noses, when we speak, it is not free to go without obstructions, or another technical term is strictures. There are obstructions usually when we speak. The first place we make strictures or obstructions is in the larynx. By the way, note that the word is stricture, not structure. Structure is the formation of something, but stricture means an obstruction, an obstacle in the way of the airstream that comes out from the lungs. So the first stricture that we make is in the larynx. What do we have in the larynx? We have the vocal folds. So when we bring the vocal folds close to each other, we make a stricture in the way of the airstream that comes out from the lungs. If the vocal folds vibrate, we hear the sound which is called voicing or phonation. Now, you can try this. I have told you how to do this earlier. Just close your mouths, don't produce any sound, just hum for yourselves. Place your hand on your throats and make a humming note like the two scientists that we saw in the video, like how do we make that sound? This is voicing or phonation. You can feel the vocal folds in your throat or in your larynx vibrating. By that vibration, we have the uh, sound that we call voicing or phonation. Different sorts of voicing can be produced when we speak. It's not just one type of voicing. When you produce a consonant, it is the vibration of the we have the vibration of the vocal folds, and that's it. No, the vibration of the vocal folds can be modified, can be changed to give different sound qualities. For example, when you read a children's story to your younger brother, your younger sister, or in the future, hopefully, to your own children, you imitate the sound of the lion, how the lion roars, and read the story for the child. For example, you say the lion said, "Oh, now I will eat you," or something like that. When people sing, what do they do? Uh, what happens when there are those different types of singing or different types of songs? It's changes that are made inside the larynx, um, changes made to the position of the vocal folds. Breathy voice, for example, oh, this is very difficult to understand. This is somehow a breathy voice. Other voice qualities as well. These are all made inside the larynx by changing the position and the shape of the vocal folds by people who learn that, or even by normal people who know how to do that. How do you imitate someone old? How do you imitate a child? These are all made with the vocal folds partly and with other um, uh, factors combined as well, of course. But the main thing is about the position of the vocal folds. Before coming to that, I want to show you another video and then move on to the other slides. Okay, let's watch this video together as well.
Check 1, check 2.
Have you ever wondered how the human voice works? We've all got one, but because it's located inside your neck, it's difficult to get to, making it virtually impossible to directly see and feel. Laryngologists examine the larynx, what some people call the voice box, using a technique called endoscopic examination. They do this with either a fixed scope, which is inserted into the mouth, or a flexible scope that is passed through the nasal cavity. The scope has a small light and camera that illuminates and videos the internal workings of the larynx. Here we can see the vocal folds, with the bottom of the screen showing the front of the singer and the top of the screen displaying the arytenoids, which bring the vocal folds together for speech and singing. The video we are looking at here is of an adult-sized voice. Interestingly, there is a difference in the size of the larynx between men and women, with the male adult voice being larger than the female adult voice. And as you might suspect, the adult voice is significantly bigger than the prepubescent voice. Baby bear, mama bear, and papa bear is a good way to remember it. And this is the reason why the superior thyroid notch, what most people call the Adam's apple, protrudes on most adult men, and why it doesn't protrude on most adult women. The size difference also explains, in part, the various voice types: soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, but more about that in a moment. When singing teachers and vocal coaches work with the student voice, they often approach it as one whole system that is made up of 4 components: the actuator, the vibrator, the resonator, and the articulators. When explaining these 4 components, Chalmers writes, "The actuator is the breath, the power source, and energy of the voice. The vibrator is the pair of vocal folds, which is valve-like structure of muscle and tissue. The resonator is the vocal tract, a combination of the larynx, the pharynx, and the oral cavity, amplifying the sound. And finally, The articulators are primarily the tongue and lips, which shape the sound into meaningful units. Every engine needs fuel, and your voice is no different. Your breath, or your actuator, fuels your voice. Breathing is split into two phases: inhalation and exhalation. To inhale, the diaphragm contracts, drawing air into the vocal tract through the larynx and down into the lungs. For the singer, the exhalation phase is managed primarily by the abdominals and the obliques. Learning to manage.
By the way, this video is created by a professional, a trainer in singing and voicing, but what we need to know is some of the information that he presents, which is about half the video. The rest is really not related to us.
Manage the outflow of air as well as adjusting part of the challenge facing the developer. Muscular bodies known as vocal folds. Historically referred to as vocal cords, the structures of each fold has 5 layers. Number 1, the outer layer known as the epithelium. 2, number and of the thyroid meters in length. And as we age into born, your vocal folds were approximately 3 thyroid.
After this, he talks about the length of the vocal folds, which is also an important information to know.
Arytenoid muscle. When you were born, your vocal folds were approximately 3 millimeters in length, and as we age into adulthood, they grow to between 9 to 13 millimeters for women and 15 to 20 millimeters for men.
So, as we said, if the vocal folds are shorter, the sound is higher pitched. If the vocal folds are longer, the sound is deeper. That's why, again, men have longer vocal folds and they have deeper voices.
To create sound, the vocal folds are drawn together momentarily, closing the glottis. Glottis is the term given to the space directly between the vocal folds. The air pressure builds beneath the closed vocal folds, and the glottis starts to open from the underside through to the top side, allowing air to escape between the leading edges of the vocal folds. When singing an A4, the same tuning pitch as an orchestra.
The movement that you saw in the animation, this movement, the opening and the closing of the vocal folds, happens very quickly, as we said, about 200 to 300 times per second in 1 second for women, and about half that, meaning 100 to 150 times in men when they speak normally. We're not talking about singing and other positions. So this was another video that I wanted you to watch as well. Well, coming back to our slides, as we said, we can have different qualities, and we'll look at um, 2 examples which show different qualities of the vocal folds. First, try saying this sentence using the glottal stop or the glottal plosive, which replaces t as it might be in Cockney. Cockney is one of the accents in London, and mostly in British English, um, T sounds are replaced with a glottal stop when when people speak informally with their friends, but this is not used in formal settings. When, for example, a student talks to his teacher, and so on and so forth. A doctor with his or her patient. They don't use glottal stops in those settings, but when friends and family and close acquaintances talk to each other, they can use, and they do use, a glottal stop which replaces T. Therefore, in this sentence, I've got to put a lot of butter on that little bit of bread. In the transcription, you can see that the T's I've got a, the T is replaced with a glottal stop. Put a again replaced with a glottal stop, a lot, butter, butter on that, that, little bit becomes bit, and bread. Stop the video or pause the video and try to read out this transcription, and then I'll play a soundtrack which is about that sentence. I've got to put a lot of butter on that little bit of bread. Let's see how someone from with a Cockney accent would read that. Someone from the Great Britain.
I've got to put a lot of butter on that little bit of bread.
I'll replay it one more time.
I've got to put a lot of butter on that little bit of bread.
Well, you see how they produce those glottal stops. That is one of the positions of the vocal folds, as we said, when they are firmly closed to each other. We have the same sound in Kurdish as well. Awa, ama, amana, and so on. أو أي ثلاثات glottal stop. Now we'll listen to another recording on the website which imitates different glottal settings, different glottal positions for this sentence in English. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack and Jill went up the hill to bring a bucket of water. The first quality is voice, then whisper, then breathy voice, and after that, creaky voice. Voice, whisper, breathy voice, creaky voice. Let's listen to the recording and see how the speaker reads them out.
Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water.
This is normal voice.
Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water.
This is whisper, and a whisper is made when you make a change in the position of the vocal folds.
Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water.
This is called breathy voice.
Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water.
And that was creaky voice. Imagine these are all made with changes in the position and the setting of the vocal folds. And next slide is about subglottal pressure. We said that the position of the vocal folds can be changed, and the pressure of the air below the vocal folds can also be different. We can have different three main differences that are found in the subglottal pressure. We call the pressure of air below the vocal folds subglottal pressure. The first variation is found in intensity, in the loudness of the sound that is made. So, as a result, when we have voicing with high intensity, shouting is produced. But when we have sounding or voicing with low intensity, then speaking quietly is produced. If there are differences in frequency, in the vibration of the vocal folds, uh, the rapid vibration results in voicing that is at high frequency and that's highly pitched. So, voice like that of a female. But when we have fewer vibrations, the frequency is lower, the pitch is lower, and we have a deep voice like that of female speakers. Differences, the third variation, differences in quality, different sounding voice qualities like those that I just played for you in the second track, the second recording. harsh voice, a breathy voice, murmured, a creaky voice, normal voicing, imitating a lion, imitating a duck, imitating a giant character in one of the stories, singing Persian song, what they call chah usually, you know, and listen to Shajarian or Shahrami Nazri or any other Persian singer, how they play with their voices. Listen to Kurdish singers like Sayyid Ali Asghari Kurdistani, like Mazhari Khaliqi, and other singers as well. Those are different variations in the quality of the sound. So, by playing with the vocal folds, we can have those qualities. By the way, what I have uh, recorded for you in the slides are important, and don't worry about the details that I mentioned in the explanations. What you need to know is about the details, the points that are mentioned in the slides, but my explanations make it possible for you to understand them better, I hope, of course. So far, we have talked about the mechanism of producing sounds and voicing. So, based on these, what sounds can we make in English? We have already studied the vowels, and of course, vowels are produced using this mechanism, depending on the airstream that comes out from the lungs and the larynx, the vocal folds vibrate, and all the vowels are voiced. In producing every vowel, we have voicing and the vibration of the vocal folds. After that, we will start studying the consonants of English. How are the consonants produced and what types of consonants are there in English? We will start with the plosives and then move on to the other consonant types in the language. The plosives are consonant sounds which are produced in the following phases. The first phase, the first stage of producing consonant sound is called the closing phase, when the articulator or the articulators move to form the structure for the plosive. We said that the air is not free when it passes inside the vocal tract, and various obstructions and structures are made, especially for the consonants. In the stops or in the plosives, by the way, plosives are a type of stops, and stops include both plosives and affricates. Therefore, in other books, in other places, you may see the word stop used to describe a plosive like ptk or bdg. But the more accurate word for ptk and bdg for these six sounds is plosive. Plosive because there is a small plosion when we articulate them. So, if we think about P, for example, the articulators, which are both lips, approach each other, they move to form the obstruction for the plosive. Then, after that, there's the compression stage when the compressed air is stopped from escaping. You press both your lips to each other, or in the case of producing K, back of the tongue is pressed against the soft palate. And in the second phase, an amount of air is compressed behind that structure or that obstruction so that no air can escape inside the mouth. Then in the third stage, there is the release phase. In the release phase, the articulators are moved apart. The lips for P and B are moved apart from each other. The tongue is moved apart from the soft palate in producing K so as to allow the air to escape. First, the air is compressed behind the structure. Then, in the third stage, it is allowed to escape. And Then in the fourth stage, we have the post-release phase. What happens? The plosion, the sound that we hear after the release. This happens immediately after the third stage. Uh, we have six plosives in English, which are ptk and btk, with different places of articulation. Pb are bilabial. Um, Td are alveolar, and kg are velar. You know by now, I think you know what we mean by these expressions. Bilabial means produced with both lips interacting. Alveolar means the tongue is in contact with the alveolar ridge, and velar means that in producing k and g, back of the tongue is in contact with velum or the soft palate. Spelling is important in the description of the vowel of the consonants, by the way. When we talk about voicing, p, t, k are always voiceless. By voiceless, we mean the vocal folds do not vibrate, but big have different voicing states. Sometimes they are very uh, little, there's very little voicing, and sometimes there is voicing in rare cases. And in other states, as they are somehow voiceless. There is no voicing in the production of big. So this is if we speak about voicing. All of them, all six consonants, occur in initial position, which means at the beginning of English words. They also occur in medial position between other vowels, and they also occur in final position at the end of a word. Now, let's describe the positions and the environments in which they occur. In initial position, if we want to describe voicing, there is no voicing for ptk at the beginning of a word. Ptk, as we said, are always voiceless, but for btk there is normally very little voicing. So no voicing for ptk and very little voicing for btk. And there is a phenomenon that's called aspiration. The release of ptk is followed by audible explosion that can be heard, and it is a small explosion, but it can be heard. Audible means heard, can be heard. Therefore, there is aspiration. You can try this by putting your palm in front of your mouth. Aspiration is a sound like h, and this happens in the post-release phase, the stage after the third stage when air is allowed to speak. However, the release of BDG is followed by weak plosion, and because the plosion is weak, we don't have aspiration. Therefore, as you can see, the most noticeable and important difference between initial plosives at the beginning of words, is the aspiration of ptk. It's not voicing. You can see there is no voicing for ptk and very little voicing for btk. That's why it's not the main difference, but the main difference is aspiration. P, T, K are aspirated, B, D, G are unaspirated. The third point that uh, should be discussed is other preceding consonants. What other sounds can occur before the plosives at the beginning of a word in initial position? Consonant C, as you see, refers to a consonant, and V refers to a vowel. So in this case, we have the plosives, but can we have another consonant before the plosives? BDG cannot be preceded by any consonant in English. Therefore, we don't have a consonant cluster starting with another sound then having B, D, or G. But PTK may be preceded by the sound S. In this case, if P, T, K are preceded by S, they lose aspiration. An example is spy. We have S, P, spy, but we don't have spy in English. Another example is sky, sick, but not sky. And another word is sty, STY, but not sty. And that's the description of the sounds and their qualities in initial position. Now let's focus more on aspiration. Aspiration is what happens, as we said, in the post-release phase, the fourth stage of the production of the plosives. Usually, it's a delay in voicing. Let me explain what's meant by this, a delay in voicing. This is the waveforms of the words tie and die. The above word is the waveform of tie, t, r, e, tie. By the way, this is a diphthong, so t, I, and d, I, die. You can see that there are very small waveforms after the release of the T. This is the plosion. This small line is the plosion of T, and there are these small waves, and then the vowel onset. Onset is another word for start. The start of the vowel, the diphthong, the start of I. These small waves refer to aspiration, and it causes a delay, a postponing in the start of the following vowel. Therefore, we use a raised small h in phonetics and phonology in order to refer to aspiration. Tie, tie. But in die, there is the release and the post-release phase here, and there is no delay between there is a small amount of delay between the end of the consonant and the beginning of the vowel. And you can see all this happens very quickly in about 400 to probably 500 milliseconds. A millisecond is uh, a thousandth part of a second. And you can try aspiration, as I said, by putting your hand in front of your mouth when producing kai, tai, kai, for example, and compare it to I, guy, and die. When saying pi, you can feel a puff of air, but when you say by, you can't feel that puff of air. That puff of air, pi, is what is aspiration. Or you can place a piece of paper in front of your mouth and you can see that the piece of paper moves when producing pi, but it may not move when you produce the word by. Um, we said that there can be another sound before PTK, and that sound is S. When S precedes them, when S comes before P and K, they lose aspiration. So these waves are the waves of S. Then there is T produced here, and the vowel starts immediately. Sty, sty. There is no aspiration. Sty, spy. Again, if you put your hand in front of your mouth, you will feel a very small amount of uh, that puff of air that we described for aspiration. What about medial position? In medial position, the plosives are similar to either to those in initial position or final position. So it depends on whether they are stressed or unstressed, and they act like those in the beginning and the end of the words. Therefore, we will not study that position and move to final position. What are their descriptions and their qualities in final position? Again, big have very little voicing, but pit are always voiceless in final position as well. The plosion following their release is very weak. Because the plosion is weak, there is no aspiration in final position. So what's the difference between them? Between these two pairs, Pitike and Pitike, these two sets actually. There is no difference in voicing and there is no difference in aspiration. The main difference between them is that vowels that come before Pitike are much shorter. The vowels that come before Pitike are much shorter. That's the difference between them. This shortening effect is known as prefortis clipping. Clipping means cutting, becoming shorter, and prefortis means coming before fortis sounds. We'll come to this word, what we mean by fortis sound. It is most noticeable in the long vowels and diphthongs. This effect, this shortening effect, or the technical term prefortis clipping, can be noticed when the vowel which comes before the sound is one of the long vowels or one of the diphthongs. Now we have waveforms for the plosives at the end of words or in final position. Mat, you can see that there is no aspiration, and mad, the closure is voiced, but the voicing is very little compared to the voicing of the vowel. The higher the waves, or the bigger the waves, the higher the lines. But you can see we have very small waves here, which indicates that there is very little voicing. It's also almost the same case for T, which is no voicing, no waves when we produce them. So the plosives in final position, which can be seen that there is no voicing and no aspiration as well. We said that there's prefortis clipping. What do we mean by fortis and its counterpart lenis? Fortis sounds are produced with more force, more muscular force than lenis sounds. Although this is a difficult thing to measure. How do we know that a sound is stronger than another sound? But this is the tradition in most phonology and phonetics books. That's why we'll follow that tradition as well, and we will say that Pitike are fortis sounds and Pitike are lenis sounds. The words in themselves mean strong and weak. Fortis refers to strong sounds and lenis refers to weak sounds. And we have several example words here which illustrate English stop or plosive consonants in different positions. In initial position, pi, kai, kai, and bi, di, guy. These are the six plosives in initial position. The six plosives in medial position, bi, a die, a sky, and spy, sty, sky. P comes after S. Then in final position, nap, mat, nak, nab, mad, nag. These are the six plosive sounds in different positions. And so a very quick wrap up of the lecture is that we studied the larynx and its anatomy and physiology, what it is made of, and what it has inside it. Then we said that there are the vocal folds inside them. The vocal folds can have different positions. Uh, Four main positions are wide apart, narrow glottis position for vocal fold vibration, and tightly closed vocal folds. After that, we talked about breathing and voicing. We said we depend on breathing in order to speak, and during speaking, the vocal folds vibrate, which is a process that's called voicing or phonation. So, therefore, with our chests, our throats, and our heads, we have three systems that we use during speaking. Then we focused more on voicing the vibration of the vocal folds. We said that the air is not free. So, what happens when we say it's not free? First thing that happens is that the vocal folds vibrate and voicing happens. Different sorts of voicing can be produced. Um, One of those different voicing qualities is a tweaky voice, another one is a whisper, another one is breathy voice, and so on. There's also the glottal stop, which is one of the positions of which is produced in one of the positions of the vocal folds. After that, it's not only the positions of the vocal folds that can uh, vary, but the pressure of air below the vocal folds can also change. We have three variations in intensity, in frequency, and in quality. Then we came to the study of the plosives, the different stages of plosives, the different six sounds of English plosives, their descriptions and their qualities and their characteristics at the beginning of words and also at the end of words. And then we came to the discussion of fortis and lenis, and with that, we ended the lecture. So that's it for today for this lecture. I hope you watch the video thoroughly. And again, don't forget to watch it at your own pace. Sorry to say this now. I should have said this earlier at the beginning of the video, but watch it at your own pace. Pause the video if you need, because you're free, you have a lot of time, and make use of that time. Thanks for watching the video and hope this helps.